Raptor 3's static fire campaign on the V3 Ascent configuration narrows the thrust-to-weight gap that still separates Starship from full rapid reuse. The test exercised the engine in the ascent-burn profile planned for the next Starship vehicle iteration. Hardware teams recorded chamber pressure and turbopump performance data during the run. Raptor 3 incorporates simplified plumbing and higher chamber pressure targets than the prior block. The data will feed directly into throttle response models for the ship upper stage. Engineers will now review thermal margins on the nozzle extension before the next integrated test. The campaign targets production rate improvements that support higher flight cadence once orbital refueling demonstrations begin. Remember, we covered Starship progress yesterday. This test moves the throttle modeling forward for the upper stage. Hot staging ignites the ship's 6 Raptor engines while the Super Heavy booster is still thrusting, shortening the coast phase between stages. The technique reduces gravity losses and allows the booster to retain more propellant for a powered return. Separation occurs milliseconds after ship ignition, with the booster performing a flip maneuver using its grid fins and cold gas thrusters. The method was first demonstrated on Flight 7 and has been refined through subsequent tests. This sequence directly improves the energy margin available for the booster's return to launch site burn. Central Florida residents reported a distinct double boom signature after the most recent Falcon 9 ascent, consistent with booster re-entry and fairing separation events. Temporary power generation turbines at the Memphis site have been removed following commissioning of grid connections. Permanent turbine installations are now scheduled for phased delivery through the end of the year. The shift reduces reliance on mobile units during peak compute loads. Grid-tied generation now supplies the primary load for the Colossus-class training clusters at the facility. Engineers on X are discussing the removal of temporary turbines at the Memphis XAI site and what the transition implies for sustained power delivery to training racks. Experts are calling for standardized collision avoidance protocols and deorbit timelines as multiple firms plan large orbital compute constellations. Key concerns include radio frequency interference with existing Starlink shells and the risk of cascading debris from high-density orbits. Proposed rules would require active station-keeping margins and end-of-life disposal burns within a fixed window after mission completion. The discussion centers on how these new assets would coexist with the growing Starlink constellation in low Earth orbit. A proposed federal rule change would streamline environmental reviews for commercial launch sites. The same report notes an expended Falcon 9 upper stage is on course for a lunar impact near Einstein crater on August 5th. Trajectory analysts have refined the impact ellipse using recent tracking passes. The stage follows a disposal trajectory set after its final payload deployment. Observers tracking the Falcon 9 upper stage disposal are debating whether the August 5th lunar impact will produce measurable seismic data for future precision landing studies. Ukrainian officials have requested U.S. facilitation to expand Starlink terminal approvals for strike coordination. The request centers on terminals already inside Ukraine that could support operations beyond current borders. No change to existing export controls has been confirmed. The discussion involves coordination between Kiev, Washington, and SpaceX on terminal usage policies. Reddit users in our SpaceX Lounge are marking 7 years since the first Starship tank tests, noting the shift from stainless steel prototypes to flight-ready vehicles with integrated heat shield tiles. One thing worth watching is that a new federal proposal to ease environmental reviews for launch sites has drawn criticism from groups concerned that reduced oversight could increase local air and noise impacts near existing pads. Proponents argue the change would accelerate pad certifications without altering core safety standards. Resolution hinges on the final language of the rule and any required public comment period. Critics have requested additional modeling on cumulative emissions from higher launch rates. On the AI front, Cursor's Benchmark Partners program will publish reference metrics on Grok integration inside enterprise coding environments, including measured token throughput under sustained load. The metrics aim to give customers concrete data on latency and scaling behavior when running Grok models at volume. EXAI's Memphis site has completed removal of temporary turbines, shifting to permanent grid-tied generation for its Colossus-class training clusters. The change follows successful commissioning of new grid connections and supports higher sustained utilization of the installed hardware. Space News analysts are urging early development of collision avoidance standards for proposed orbital data center constellations that would share orbits with Starlink shells. The recommendations include mandatory station-keeping margins and defined deorbit timelines to limit debris risk. From an engineering standpoint, Raptor 3's recent static fire run on the V3 ascent profile highlights a deliberate simplification of the propellant feed system. By eliminating several bellows and joints that existed on earlier blocks, designers reduced both part count and potential leak paths while raising chamber pressure. The trade-off appears in higher turbopump speeds, which must be balanced against bearing life and thermal margins on the nozzle. Data from the test will update models that predict how the engine responds across the throttle band required for ship upper stage ascent. If raw material and energy costs set the floor, the idiot index for a flight engine remains high because precision machining, exotic alloys, and extensive qualification testing still multiply the input price. Each incremental reduction in part count directly compresses that multiplier. The current test campaign is therefore measuring whether the simplified architecture can sustain the required throttle range without introducing new vibration modes that would force additional damping hardware. Success would allow higher engine production rates without proportional increases in inspection or rework time. Success here would lower the recurring cost per engine enough to support the flight rate needed for orbital refueling demonstrations. The next visible milestone will be whether the same engine block can complete a full-duration burn profile that matches the energy budget of a Starship ascent to the tanker rendezvous orbit. That outcome would directly address the open question of how quickly the program can move from single flight tests to repeated tanker operations. And a quick market note, S&P CX closed at $112.20. Before we go, the nozzle extension thermal margin review will show whether the simplified plumbing sustains the full ascent throttle band. That's your SpaceX news for today. S&P CX is trading at $112.20, down 0.5%. If the show saves you time, a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify genuinely helps new listeners find it. I'm Patrick in Vancouver. Thanks for listening. See you tomorrow. One more thing. If you liked today's episode, our sister show, The Do Positive Pod, is worth a spot in your feed. Good news in science and tech, plus one concrete action you can take. It's one of the Nera Network's daily briefings, all free at neranetwork.com. Live dashboards, TSLA, SpaceX launches, the investing scoreboard are all at neranetwork.com data. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice, editorial selection and analysis are my own.